Hey everybody, it's Mr. Sauce here. I just want to make a quick video going over what a unit rate is and what unit prices are. And I think this will help us out on assignment number 4 on Google Classroom, but then also just with unit rates in general. So before I get started, I just want to define the two terms. So we'll start by defining what a rate is in general. And a rate is a ratio that compares two quantities with different units. And you notice how if there are different units, we have to distinguish them from one another. And we do that by labeling it, right? So we want to put labels on our different units that we'll use, whether it's miles per gallon, miles per hour, right? When we work with unit prices, it will be dollars per banana, right? Dollars per calculator, etc. So a unit rate is a rate, but with the denominator of 1. And the denominator, again, is the bottom number in a fraction. So it's the price, or it's the rate per one of something, right? If we have a unit price, it'll be the price per one of something, right? Which is often used when you are comparing items at a store. So as an example, we'll create a rate and a unit rate with this specific example. So if you drove 342 miles on 15.4 gallons of gas, the rate of miles to gallons, right, that specific order, miles to gallons, would be 342 over 15.4. So what we're going to have to look to do, right, and this is the specific order of miles to gallons, so miles to gallons, all right, so the order matters. But what we're going to look to do in order to create a unit rate would be to set this problem up and divide 342 by 15.4 to find the miles per one of those gallons. And we want to keep it in that same order so we can find out the miles per one of those gallons. And the way we do that is through to divide. We want to divide 342 by 15.4. And if we did that, we'd end up with 22.2 miles in 1 gallon. Okay, and that would be a unit rate. Notice how our denominator is 1 now, right? And that's what a unit rate is. It's a rate with a unit with a denominator of 1. Okay. So, taking a look here, I want to compare. Let's get rid of these little symbols down here at the bottom. But I want to compare a unit rate and a unit price, but we'll start by just doing a couple more examples of a unit rate here, and then we'll get into some more unit or some of the unit prices. So the biggest thing about a unit rate is that it must be set up in terms of what they're asking for. And what that means is the order matters, right? I've mentioned that several times in class already. So the order matters the most. And for example, I wrote another driving example. So if I drove 204 miles in 3 hours, what is the unit rate of miles per hour? And I wrote that in red because that's the most important part in this problem. That gives us the order in which we need to set up our rate or unit rate. So I said we need to set up that ratio in that specific order. And the way it would look would be miles over hour with that line that divides it representing that word per, right? It's a comparison word. So it would be miles, and then we can either see the word per, or sometimes you'll even see the word each, right? So it's miles per hour. That's how we set that problem up here. And what we have to do now, once we set up our units in the proper order, all we have to do is look to plug in our values that are represented in the units in the expression or in the word problem here. So it's 204 miles in 3 hours, or per 3 hours. So we want to find out what's the mile per one single hour. And we're going to do that the same way that we just did the last problem, and that's through division. So if we were to divide 204 by 3 to find out how many miles we would drive in 1 hour, we'd end up with 68 miles in one single hour, right? 3 can go into 204 68 times. And that's an example of a unit rate. Notice how the most important part was setting up our unit rate in that specific order here. And the order matters the most. All right, we're going to go over another example real quick about unit rates, and then we'll jump into talking about unit prices right afterwards. So let's erase these symbols here at the bottom. And let's do example number 2. If Eli ran a 6-mile race in 51 minutes, what was his unit rate of minutes per mile? Okay, once again, I wrote the most important part in red, and that's the order in which we need to set this ratio up. Okay, so we must set it up in the unit rate in that specific order. So it must be minutes over miles. Okay, although if we look at our word problem, right, miles come first and then minutes, so it might be confusing sometimes. We want to put 6 over the 51, 6 miles over the 51. However, we need to put it in minutes first over the miles because that's what they're asking for. All right, so we'd have to set it up in this specific order. So it would be, like I said, minutes over miles. And all we have to do at this point, right, is plug in our values. So if it was minutes, there were 51 minutes that he ran it in. And then it took 51 minutes to run 6 miles. So 6 would be at the bottom of that fraction or the denominator. And just to clarify, right, that word per, we can use the line, the fraction line, the divider line, to use that to represent the word per or each sometimes in a problem, right? How many miles or how many minutes in each mile did it take them, right? Or how many minutes per mile did it take him, right? And that's the idea of what we're looking to find here. So if we were to do the division, we'd end up taking 51 and divide by 6. And that would give us a unit rate of 8.5 minutes, which would be about 8 minutes and 30 seconds, right? A half a minute would be 30 seconds in 1 mile, right? And that's a pretty good pace for 6 miles. It just makes me tired thinking about that. So that's what the idea of what a unit rate will get us here. And remember, order matters the absolute most. So let's take a second. We'll talk about unit price. And actually, unit price between you and me, it's actually probably a little easier because we always will put the money on top in the unit at the bottom, right? So if we're talking about an example of calculators, right? It's $220 for 8 calculators. We want to set up the money on top and the calculators at the bottom. Money will always be on top here when we're comparing unit prices. And if we did that, right, we just want to plug in the values. So it's $220 for 8 calculators. And then we find that same unit price by the same way that we found the unit rates, which is through division. So we want to divide 220 by 8. So take a second. You can pause the video to see what we end up getting, to see if you get the correct unit price. But if you end up getting $27.50 or $27.50 for 1 calculator, you set up the problem correctly and you divided correctly here. Okay, so what this is a unit price, and you might go to Staples and realize that if you got 8 calculators at Staples and it was $220, and you went to Walmart and you got 10 calculators for the same price, right? You know which one to which deal would be a better deal, right? Sometimes it's hard to compare, especially if you buy multiple or different units or different values, right? If you got 8 calculators at Staples and 10 calculators at Walmart, right? Sometimes it's hard to compare what the better deal would be, especially if it's different prices. Okay, so that's why a unit price will be really handy in being a smart shopper here. But that's the idea, right? We want to set up our rates in the order of dollars over our unit. So example number 2, I just want to talk about is you bought 10 bananas for $8.50. How much is one banana worth if that's $8.50 for 10 bananas? So pause the video, see if you can set up the rate in the proper order. And if that order you set it up in is dollars over bananas, right? And we input our values in, so it would be $8.50 for 10 bananas. That's the proper order, right? Remember, dollars over our unit there. So the same way we just found out the calculator example, we want to divide. We want to divide 850 by 10 to find out how much it costs for one banana. And you can pause the video again to see what you get. But if you end up getting 85 cents per banana, then you got the correct division there, right? So the biggest thing with unit prices, everybody, is we need to keep our dollars over on top of our units, whatever they are, right? So it would be dollars over bananas for this example, or for example number 1, it'd be dollars over calculators. But for both unit rates and unit prices, the biggest thing is that the order matters the most. All right. I hope this helps us out with some of the assignment number 4 in just unit rates and unit prices in general. But please reach out if you guys have any questions, and have a great rest of your day today.